May 1945, Hamburg, Germany. A starving German mother broke military law by begging an Australian soldier for food, risking arrest just to save her dying children. What he did next was so dangerous that it could have sent him to prison for 6 months, but it changed both their lives forever. Would you risk everything to feed your enemy's children, knowing you might never see your own family again? The war in Europe ended just days ago, but for the people living in the ruins of this German city, the suffering has only begun. Private Edward Martin, everyone calls him Ted, stands guard on a street corner where 3 out of every 4 buildings are nothing but piles of broken stone and twisted metal. He is 24 years old, wearing the uniform of the Australian Imperial Force, part of the British Commonwealth Army, now controlling this destroyed city. The spring air is warm, but it cannot hide the smell that hangs over everything. Death and smoke and sewage mixed together in a stench that makes new soldiers sick for their first week here. Ted has been here 3 weeks now. He no longer notices the smell. Ted grew up on a farm in Queensland, Australia, a place so different from Hamburg that it might as well be another planet. His family raised cattle and sheep on land that turned to dust during the terrible droughts. He remembers his mother rationing food during the worst years of the Great Depression back in 1936 when he was 15. He remembers her face, thin and tired, as she divided 1 loaf of bread among 7 people. He remembers going to bed hungry more nights than he can count. The farm barely survived. Many of their neighbors lost everything. That hunger taught Ted something about suffering that no military training could teach. It gave him eyes that could recognize desperation in any language, on any face. Hamburg is dying. The official reports say 75% of the city was destroyed by bombing raids. Over 42,000 civilians died in the firestorms that swept through the streets during the war. But those are just numbers. The real Hamburg is what Ted sees every day on his patrol. Children with stick-thin arms and swollen bellies, old women digging through rubble looking for anything to eat, men who were once soldiers, now missing legs or arms, begging on street corners. The ration cards the Allied forces give to German civilians provide only 800 to 1,000 calories per day. Ted knows this number because his commanding officer told all the soldiers during a briefing. A human being needs at least 2,000 calories per day to survive. These people are getting less than half of what they need. They are starving slowly, day by day. The military has strict rules about dealing with German civilians. The order is called non-fraternization. No talking to Germans unless necessary for military duties. No friendship, no kindness, no sympathy. The officers repeat these rules at every morning briefing. Any soldier caught being friendly with a German can face court-martial. Ted has seen 2 soldiers arrested already. One gave chocolate to a small girl. The other helped an old man move rubble from his doorway. Both men now face 6 months in military prison. The message is clear. These are the enemy. They started the war. They deserve whatever suffering comes to them. Ted's commanding officer, a British brigadier with a voice like gravel, said it clearly just yesterday morning. Let them taste what they made others endure. Every civilian who suffers is one less person who might support another war. We show them no mercy because they showed no mercy. The other officers nodded in agreement. Most of the soldiers accept this logic. The Germans killed their friends. The Germans started this whole terrible war. Why should anyone feel sorry for them now? But Ted cannot make himself believe it. Not completely. Every day on patrol, he sees faces that remind him of home. A mother with 3 children looks exactly like his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who lost her farm in 1937. An old man with kind eyes could be his grandfather. These people look tired and scared and hungry. They look like people, not like monsters. It is May 14th, 1945. The afternoon sun beats down on the rubble. Ted is walking his patrol route down what used to be a shopping street. Now it is a path between mountains of broken bricks. His boots crunch on shattered glass with every step. The sound echoes off the few walls still standing. He is thinking about the letter he received from his mother yesterday. She asked when he would come home. She said his father needs help with the farm. She said she prays for him every night. Then he sees her. A woman, maybe 35 years old, though hunger and fear make everyone look older than they are. She is thin, so thin that her dress hangs on her like a sheet on a clothesline. Her blonde hair is dirty and tied back with a piece of string. But it is her eyes that stop Ted in his tracks. They are blue and desperate and filled with a kind of determination he recognizes instantly. Those are his mother's eyes. The same look his mother had in 1936 when she walked 5 miles to town to beg the shopkeeper for credit they could not afford. The look that says she will do anything, absolutely anything, to save her children. The woman approaches slowly. She knows the rules too. Germans are not supposed to talk to soldiers, but she is beyond caring about rules. She stops 3 feet away from Ted and speaks in broken English. "Please, sir, food, my children, please." Her voice shakes. Her hands shake. Everything about her shakes with fear and hunger and hope. Ted should walk away. That is what the rules say. That is what every officer would tell him to do. 2 soldiers are in prison right now for less than what this woman is asking. But Ted stands there, frozen, staring into those desperate blue eyes. In this moment, every rule and regulation seems like words on paper, meaningless compared to the reality standing in front of him. This woman is not the enemy. This woman is a mother trying to save her children. Ted knows this in his bones because he has seen this before, in his own mother's face, in another time of hunger and fear. Something breaks inside Ted's chest, not breaks like shattering, breaks like a dam giving way, letting something flow that was held back too long. He thinks about the ration tins in his pack. He gets 4 tins per day: meat, vegetables, crackers, fruit. 1,600 calories total, enough to keep a soldier strong and healthy. More food than this woman and her children have probably seen in weeks. This food belongs to the Australian Army, and sharing it is a crime. But in this moment, Ted realizes something that will change everything. Sometimes following rules means ignoring what is right. Sometimes the most important choice is the one that breaks all the regulations. Ted makes his decision. He does not think about consequences. He does not think about prison. He thinks only about his mother's face in 1936 and this German mother's face in 1945, and how they are exactly the same face. He reaches into his pack. Ted pulls 3 ration tins from his pack, keeping only one for himself. The tins are heavy in his hands, stamped with Australian military markings. Each one contains enough food for a full meal. He has meat, vegetables, and crackers. Together, these 3 tins hold about 1,200 calories, 3/4 of his daily ration. He will be hungry tonight, but he has been hungry before. But he knows he will survive. This woman's children might not survive without help. Ted does not simply hand over the tins. Something in the woman's eyes, that same desperate determination, makes him think there are more people suffering than just her. He gestures for her to lead the way. She hesitates for a moment, afraid this might be a trap, afraid he might be testing her before turning her into the authorities. Then she sees something in his face that must convince her. She turns and walks quickly down a side street, looking back every few steps to make sure he follows. They walk for 5 minutes through the ruins. The woman moves fast, despite her weakness, weaving between piles of rubble like someone who knows this path by heart. Ted follows, his heart pounding. If an officer sees him leaving his patrol route with a German civilian, he will face immediate arrest. Every corner they turn could be the corner where his military career ends, but he keeps walking. The woman stops at a building that looks like it might collapse at any moment. The front wall is mostly gone, revealing the inside like a dollhouse cut in half. She climbs through a gap in the rubble. Ted follows, his uniform snagging on broken wood and twisted metal. Inside, the air is cooler and darker. It smells like damp stone and something else. Unwashed bodies, sickness, fear. Then he sees them. 7 children, ranging from about 3 years old to 12. They are huddled together in what used to be a basement room. The youngest ones have bellies that stick out too far, a sign of severe hunger. The older ones have arms and legs like sticks. Their eyes are huge in their thin faces. When they see Ted's uniform, they shrink back against the wall. They are terrified. They have learned that soldiers mean danger. The mother speaks to them quickly in German, her voice soft and urgent. Ted does not understand the words, but he understands the meaning. She is telling them it is safe. She is telling them this soldier brought food. The children stare at the tins in Ted's hands like they are seeing something magical. Ted opens the first tin, meat and gravy. The smell fills the small space. He hears one of the children make a sound, almost like crying. He uses his pocket knife to cut the crackers into small pieces. The mother finds 3 chipped bowls and 1 cup. Ted divides the food as evenly as he can. It is not much when split among 8 people, but it is more than they have had in days, maybe weeks. Then Ted does something that surprises even himself. He sits down on the floor with them. He watches as the mother helps the smallest children eat slowly. She knows that starving people cannot eat too fast or they will get sick. Ted stays for 20 minutes, maybe 30. He does not speak because he cannot speak German and they cannot speak English. But he smiles at the children. The youngest one, a little boy about 5 years old with blonde hair and blue eyes, smiles back. It is the first time Ted has seen a German child smile since he arrived in Hamburg. When Ted finally leaves, he knows this cannot be a one-time event. Those children will be hungry again tomorrow. The mother will still be desperate. The problem has not been solved. It has only been delayed by a few hours. But Ted has already decided. He will come back. He will bring more food. Somehow he will keep these people alive. The first challenge is his tent mate, a soldier from Sydney named Jack Cooper. Jack notices everything. If Ted's rations disappear regularly, Jack will ask questions. Ted needs to buy Jack's silence. That evening, after the sun goes down and the camp is settling in for the night, Ted makes an offer. He gives Jack his cigarette ration for the week. Cigarettes are worth more than money in occupied Germany. German civilians will trade almost anything for cigarettes. Jack looks at Ted for a long moment, then takes the cigarettes without asking why. Some questions are better left unasked. For 2 weeks, Ted continues his secret mission. Every other day, he brings 3 ration tins to Margaret Hoffman and her children. He learns her name from a piece of paper she shows him, written in careful English. He learns the children's names too. Klaus is the 5-year-old who smiled. Anna is 7. Friedrich is 9. There are 4 others, nieces and nephews, whose parents died in the bombing raids. Margaret is caring for all of them alone. Ted starts looking thin. He is living on 1/4 of his normal rations, sometimes less. By the end of May, his uniform hangs looser on his frame. His sergeant, William Hughes, notices during a morning inspection. Hughes is a hard man, 43 years old, a career soldier who lost his own son at the Battle of Tobruk in North Africa. He pulls Ted aside after the inspection. "You sick, Private Martin?" Hughes asks, his eyes sharp and knowing. Ted considers lying. "Stomach troubles, Sergeant. Nothing serious." Hughes stares at him for what feels like a full minute. Then he says something Ted does not expect. "I'll be adjusting patrol routes this week. You'll be covering the Eastern District more often. Fewer officers patrol that area. Understood?" Ted understands perfectly. Hughes knows what Ted is doing. Instead of reporting him, the sergeant is helping him. He is giving Ted more opportunities to reach the civilian areas while maintaining cover. It is plausible deniability. Like, if anyone asks, Hughes can say he was just rotating patrol assignments. Ted is not alone in his rebellion. By early June, he discovers 4 other Australian soldiers doing the same thing. They never planned to meet. They simply ran into each other while bringing food to different families. There is Private James Wilson, who feeds a family of 6. Corporal Robert Davies, who brings rations to an orphanage hiding in a church basement. Lance Corporal Thomas Wright, who splits his food with an old couple too weak to search the rubble for scraps. Private Michael O'Brien, who discovered 3 families living in a bombed factory and decided he could not walk past them anymore. They start coordinating. They share information about which officers look the other way and which ones enforce the non-fraternization rules strictly. They trade patrol schedules so someone can always reach the families who depend on them. They become a network, an underground railroad of food running through the ruins of Hamburg. By mid-June, they are feeding 23 German families. That is nearly 100 people surviving on shared military rations. The risk grows with every day. Military police have started random checks looking for soldiers who show signs of fraternization. 3 men in another unit were caught and court-martialed in early June. They each received 90 days of hard labor. The MPs are watching more carefully now. The soldiers know that discovery is not a question of if, but when. Ted writes in his diary on June 20th. Klaus smiled again today. He is gaining weight. His arms do not look like sticks anymore. Anna told her aunt a joke and they all laughed. I had forgotten what German laughter sounds like. It sounds like any laughter. It sounds human. By the end of June, 840 meals per week are being secretly diverted from military supplies to German civilians. The soldiers are running a full-scale relief operation right under their commanders' noses. They are breaking regulations, violating orders, and risking their freedom. But when Ted sits in that basement room and watches Klaus eat, when he sees Margaret's eyes fill with tears of gratitude instead of desperation, he knows with absolute certainty that he is doing the right thing. The rules say he is a criminal. His conscience says he is finally being the kind of man his mother raised him to be. By July 1945, something strange starts happening in Ted's patrol sector. The death rate among civilians begins to drop. The medical officer mentions it during a briefing, puzzled by the numbers. In most of Hamburg, German civilians are dying at predictable rates from starvation and disease. But in the Eastern District where Ted and his network operate, fewer people are dying than expected. The officer cannot explain it. He suggests that perhaps the civilians in that area had better food stores hidden away before the occupation began. Ted and the others know the real reason. Between June and August, civilian deaths in their sectors dropped by 34% compared to the rest of Hamburg. Child malnutrition rates fall from 71% to 43% in the areas where soldiers share their rations. These are not official statistics because nobody is officially tracking what the soldiers are doing. But Ted keeps count in his diary. He watches the children fill out. He sees color return to their faces. He counts the people who are alive today who would be dead if he had followed the rules. The network grows. By September, between 150 and 200 Allied soldiers are participating in secret feeding programs across Hamburg. Some are Australians, like Ted. Others are British. A few are Canadian. They come from different units, different backgrounds, different reasons. Some lost family in the war and want revenge against the suffering. Others, like Ted, simply cannot watch children starve. But whatever brought them to this choice, they are now part of something larger than any individual act of kindness. Together, they are feeding approximately 1,200 German civilians every single day, but the military police are closing in. In August, headquarters launches something they call Operation Clean Hands. The name itself is insulting to men like Ted. Their hands are not dirty. Their hands are feeding the hungry. But the MPs see it differently. They see soldiers betraying their uniforms, fraternizing with the enemy, undermining military discipline. The crackdown is swift and harsh. 17 soldiers are arrested in August alone. Courts-martial are scheduled immediately. The trials are quick and the verdicts are predetermined. One soldier receives 90 days of hard labor for giving chocolate to a 7-year-old girl. Another gets 6 months for helping a German family repair their roof. The message from command is unmistakable: no mercy. No exceptions. The rules exist for a reason, and breaking them will be punished. The sounds of that summer are impossible to forget. In the basements where families hide, children cry from hunger, their voices weak and thin. The crying echoes off broken walls and drifts through empty windows. On the streets above, military police boots crack against rubble as they patrol, looking for soldiers who have wandered off their assigned routes. The MPs walk in pairs, their faces hard and suspicious. They stop soldiers randomly and check their packs. Any missing rations lead to immediate questioning. Ted develops a system. He never carries all his rations at once. He makes multiple trips carrying one tin at a time inside his shirt. If stopped, he can claim he already ate the missing food. It is a weak excuse, but it creates just enough doubt to avoid immediate arrest. Other soldiers use different tricks. Some claim rats got into their packs. Others say they threw food away after it spoiled in the heat. The excuses are lies, obvious lies, but they are enough to create the small amount of doubt that keeps them free. The summer heat is brutal. Temperatures climb to 32 degrees Celsius, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat makes everything worse. The smell of unburied bodies and open sewers becomes unbearable. Clouds of flies swarm over the rubble. Disease spreads faster in the heat. Cholera breaks out in 3 districts. Dysentery kills dozens. The conditions are so bad that even healthy soldiers start getting sick. For the starving civilians, the heat is deadly. Dehydration kills people who might have survived the hunger. But there are moments of beauty too, small moments that make the risk worthwhile. On a hot August evening, Ted brings food to Margaret's basement as usual. He finds the children singing. Anna, who is 7, learned a song from before the war and is teaching it to the younger ones. Their voices are still thin from months of hunger, but they are singing. Klaus sees Ted and runs to him, grabbing his hand, pulling him inside to listen. For those few minutes, the war feels far away. The basement is just a room where children sing and a soldier smiles. Margaret speaks more English now. Ted has been teaching her simple words and she's been practicing. One evening in September, after the children are asleep, she looks at Ted with those blue eyes that first stopped him on the street 4 months ago. She speaks slowly, choosing each word carefully. You save more than bodies. You save hope. You save believing in good. She touches her heart. Here, I was dead. You make alive again. Ted does not know what to say. He mumbles something about just doing what anyone would do, but Margaret shakes her head firmly. No, not anyone. Most soldiers walk past. You stop. You see people, not enemy. That is rare thing. That is precious thing. Later, Margaret writes these words in a journal. The journal will survive the occupation, survive the decades, and be published as a memoir in 1967. In it, she calls Ted the Australian with kind eyes who saved our lives. She writes that he gave her family something more valuable than food. He gave them proof that humanity survived the war, that somewhere beneath the uniforms and the hatred and the rules, human kindness still existed. The British try other approaches to the starvation crisis, but they fail. Official relief programs do not start meaningful food distribution until November 1945, 6 months after the occupation began. By then, thousands of civilians have died from starvation and disease. The official programs are too little, too late. They are built on forms and regulations and distribution networks that take months to establish. The soldiers' illegal networks work because they are simple and immediate. Soldiers eat less, civilians eat more. No forms required. In October, an unexpected consequence of the secret feeding becomes visible. Hamburg's civilian death rate begins dropping faster than in other occupied German cities. Official reports credit improved hygiene and disease control, but the real reason is the network of soldiers breaking rules to share food. The underground cooperation between former enemies is saving lives on a scale the military planners never anticipated. By October, Ted's network is sophisticated. They have codes and signals. A helmet placed a certain way on a street corner means MPs are nearby. A stick leaning against a wall means it is safe to proceed. They know which alleys to use and which streets to avoid. They know the patrol schedules of every officer in their sector. They operate like an intelligence network, passing information through whispers and gestures. The network feeds between 8,000 and 12,000 civilians by the end of 1945. That number is hard to verify because everything is secret. Nobody keeps official records of illegal activities. But based on the number of soldiers involved and the families they each support, Ted estimates 8,000 is conservative. It might be more. It might be many more. On a cool evening in late October, Ted sits in Margaret's basement watching the children play with a ball made of rags. Klaus is 6 now, healthy and strong. Anna helps care for the younger children. Friedrich, at 9 years old, talks about going back to school someday. They have survived the worst. They will live to see tomorrow and the day after and all the days beyond. Ted knows he played a part in that survival. He knows that breaking the rules saved these lives. But he also knows the price. 2 of the soldiers in his network were arrested last week. They face months in military prison. The crackdown continues. Every day brings new risks. Every trip to the basement might be the trip where an MP stops him and searches his pack. Every ration he shares might be the one that ends his freedom. Ted accepts this risk because he decided months ago that some things matter more than safety. Some rules deserve to be broken. Some orders should be ignored. In the space between regulations and humanity, Ted chose humanity. He would make the same choice again every single time. The non-fraternization policy officially ends in October 1946, 18 months after Ted first gave food to Margaret. By then, the policy's failure is obvious to everyone except the officers who created it. You cannot occupy a country while pretending its people do not exist. You cannot rebuild a nation while treating its citizens as invisible. The policy collapses under the weight of its own impossibility. In 1948, the Marshall Plan begins. This is America's program to rebuild Europe, including Germany. The plan provides billions of dollars in aid, food, medicine, and supplies. It is designed to prevent the starvation and desperation that led to the war in the first place. The architects of the Marshall Plan understand something that the British commanders in 1945 did not. Helping your former enemies serves everyone's long-term interests. A stable, fed, peaceful Germany benefits the entire world. The Marshall Plan works because it formalizes what soldiers like Ted were doing unofficially. It recognizes that former enemies can become friends. It proves that compassion is not weakness but strategy. The plan transforms Europe and prevents another war. Historians will later call it one of the most successful foreign policy initiatives in history. But Ted knows the real lesson. The lesson is that the Marshall Plan's architects learned from soldiers who broke the rules before the rules changed. The underground feeding networks do not disappear when the policy ends. They transform into something new. Soldiers who participated in the secret feeding establish official aid organizations after they return home. They form veteran groups dedicated to helping German civilians. These groups send food, clothing, and medicine throughout the 1950s. They build schools and hospitals. They sponsor German students to study in Australia, Britain, and Canada. The illegal network of 1945 becomes a legal bridge between former enemies. Ted returns to Australia in early 1946. He goes back to the farm in Queensland, back to the red dust and the cattle and the endless sky. He never speaks publicly about what he did in Hamburg. Technically, sharing rations remained a court-martial offense until the policy officially ended. Ted could still face charges if he talked about it. So he stays quiet. He works the farm. He marries a local girl named Sarah in 1948. They have 3 children. He lives a quiet life. But Ted and Margaret exchange letters. The first letter arrives in 1947, written in careful English. Margaret thanks Ted again. She tells him about the children. Klaus is in school now, learning to read and write. Anna wants to be a teacher. Friedrich dreams of being an engineer. The children are alive and healthy and full of hope. None of that would be true without Ted. Ted writes back. He keeps his letters short and simple. He asks about the children. He tells Margaret about the farm, about Australia, about his own children when they are born. The letters continue for 43 years. They arrive 2 or 3 times a year, crossing the ocean between Queensland and Hamburg, carrying news between 2 people who shared a moment of crisis and chose compassion over fear. Klaus Hoffmann, the 5-year-old boy who smiled at Ted in that basement, grows up to become a physician. He specializes in treating malnutrition in developing countries. He works in Africa, Asia, and South America, bringing medicine and food to starving children. When people ask him why he chose this work, Klaus tells them about an Australian soldier who risked everything to feed him when he was starving. Klaus says that Ted taught him the most important lesson of his life. Your enemy is just another human being who is afraid and hungry. If you can see past the uniform to the person underneath, you can end any war. Anna becomes a teacher, just like she dreamed. She teaches English and history in Hamburg. She tells her students about the occupation, about the hunger, about the soldier who chose kindness when he could have chosen cruelty. She teaches them that the most important moments in history are often the quiet moments when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. Ted Martin dies in 1989 at the age of 68. His funeral is held in a small church in rural Queensland. About 100 people attend, mostly neighbors and family, but 3 elderly people fly from Germany to Australia for the service. They are Klaus, Anna, and Friedrich, now in their 50s. They sit in the front row and cry while the priest talks about Ted's quiet life and good character. After the service, they tell Ted's widow and children what Ted did in Hamburg. They explain that Ted saved their lives. They say that he was a hero who never wanted anyone to know he was a hero. Sarah Martin, Ted's widow, cries as she listens to the story. She knew Ted was in Hamburg during the occupation. She knew he never liked to talk about the war, but she never knew the details. She never knew he risked prison to feed starving children. She never knew he lived on quarter rations for months to keep others alive. Learning this about her husband, even after his death, makes her love him more. It makes her understand the quiet strength that made him such a good father and husband. The broader legacy of what Ted and others did extends beyond individual lives saved. The soldiers' secret networks proved something important about human nature. They proved that empathy is stronger than hatred. They proved that ordinary people, when faced with suffering, will choose compassion even when ordered to choose cruelty. They proved that the rules designed to keep enemies apart cannot override the basic human impulse to feed the hungry. This lesson matters in every conflict that comes after. In Korea, in Vietnam, in the Balkans, in Iraq and Afghanistan, individual soldiers face the same choice Ted faced. Follow orders or follow conscience. See enemies or see humans. The soldiers who choose compassion, who risk punishment to help civilians, are following in Ted's footsteps whether they know his name or not. Today, in 2025, the world still faces this choice. In Syria, civilians starve while armies fight. In Yemen, children die from hunger while nations debate policy. In Ukraine, refugees flee with nothing while the world watches. Every one of these situations calls for people like Ted, people willing to see past the labels of enemy and ally to the simple truth that human suffering demands human response. Ted's story teaches us that the greatest acts of courage often violate orders. Innovation in humanity does not require technology or weapons or strategy. Sometimes it requires simply refusing to dehumanize the defeated. Sometimes it requires seeing your mother's eyes in a stranger's face and responding to that recognition with kindness instead of hate. The rules said feeding the enemy was betrayal. History proved that feeding the hungry was the beginning of peace. Ted was never given a medal for what he did. He was never officially recognized or honored. But Klaus and Anna and Friedrich and 4 other children lived to have children of their own because Ted chose to share his food. Those 7 children became 14 grandchildren and 28 great-grandchildren. That is Ted's real medal. That is his honor. Lives lived because he chose right over rules. In Hamburg today, there is a small memorial in what used to be the Eastern District. It honors the Allied soldiers who helped German civilians during the occupation. Ted's name is not on it because he never told anyone to add it. But Klaus visits that memorial every year on May 14th, the day Ted first brought food to his mother. Klaus brings his own grandchildren and tells them about the Australian soldier with kind eyes who saved his life and taught him that humanity matters more than hatred. The greatest victories are not won on battlefields. They are won in the quiet moments when a soldier chooses compassion over orders, when a starving mother accepts help from her nation's enemy, when both sides recognize that survival requires partnership, not punishment. Ted Martin did not end World War II. Millions of soldiers did that. But in one ruined Hamburg street, in one basement full of starving children, Ted proved something that matters just as much. He proved that peace begins when we choose to see humans instead of enemies. He proved that the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse to hate. He proved that sometimes breaking every rule is the only way to do what is right.